Welcome back to the Pro Series podcast. Today is episode 99, and today's guest is Mark Savant. He is a podcast host of the After Hours Entrepreneur podcast, plus he is a podcasting coach. So we talk about all things podcasts. He helps to have feedback on podcasting, why it's so important to have a podcast with your business. But before we get into this podcasting episode, please make sure you like, subscribe, and review this podcast on wherever you listen to podcasts. And now I hope you enjoy episode 99 with Mark Savant. Mark, thank you so much for hopping on the Pro Series podcast today. I can't wait to talk to you about all your expertise and what you've been up to.
Excited to get into it, baby. Let's go.
Yeah, I always like to start off on how we kind of got in contact with each other. And it was through our friend, actually in Australia, Adrian Ramsey kind of reached out, and we kind of always kind of shared guests that were kind of like-minded people. So he always kind of shoots out some interesting people that I should interview and vice versa. And he raved about you, and I want to learn more from not just podcasts with you, but entrepreneurship in general.
Adrian was awesome. You know, I've built up this kind of like battleship of content creation, and I'm blessed to be at this place in my life now where I'm getting asked to be a guest on podcasts all the time. I get at least 5 requests weekly, I would say, to be on podcasts. So, you know, by being able to fuel my content machine by showing up digitally, by building an audience, I'm able to connect with awesome people like Adrian, who connects me to you, who connects me to 5 more people. And it's just a really beautiful sequence.
Yeah, it's something that we probably wouldn't meet in person other than this. I mean, we could meet in person after this, but podcast just starts that relationship. And that's something we'll talk about, and we could just jump into now, why podcasting is so important. I think we hear that narrative going constantly through society that everybody's starting a podcast. And I don't necessarily think that's a bad reason. I mean, that's not a bad thing. I mean, podcast is not just great for digital content, and it's great for your business, but honestly, it just gets you in contact and educates you so much more in so many different ways that other forms of media just don't.
For sure. And I mean, you're seeing all the listeners and the viewers of the corporate media are going to the podcast now as they kick and scream and moan into the night. Yeah, people just aren't watching traditional media. They're watching podcasts. They're watching their favorite influencer. And, you know, by the way, Eric, statistically, the amount of podcasts is dropping. I've heard different numbers, but less than 2 million podcasts produced total.
Wow.
I've heard numbers as low as less than 500,000 that are actively being produced. So I still think the time is ripe. And quite frankly, I don't think you're a thought leader if you don't have a podcast. I just don't think you're a thought leader. You know, yeah, maybe you write a book once every 6 years or something, but the power of the podcast is the ability to fuel the content machine. It gives you the ability to show up all day, every day on every platform at scale. And that's really what I focus on. I focus on, let's leverage the tools so that we can automate this process as much as possible. Mm-hmm. And I just, you know, if you have the right systems in place, you have the tools are there so that you can show up all over the place all the time. And it's really powerful getting your name at the front of the yellow pages for all you oldies out there. You know what the yellow pages are. The podcast is the tool to get you to the front.
Why do you think it's so many people dropping out of producing podcasts? Like they start it and then just kind of drop out.
So I've been podcasting for 5 years now. The After Hours Entrepreneur is ranked the top 1%. I produced hundreds and hundreds of episodes for my shows personally, thousands of episodes when it comes to clients. And I think that the reason that most podcasts drop off is a combination of a couple things. A, they're going into the podcast without the right expectations or with the wrong goals. For example, if you go into a podcast thinking that after a first year, I want to make $100,000 and I want to be getting 10,000 downloads a month, that per episode, that's probably not the way to attack it. Going into a podcast for sponsorships is tough. It's very difficult to make real money. Like you can make some money, and that's something that I try to work with clients on, is how can we make enough money to pay for the cost of production? But it's, you know, you're not going to quit your day job with sponsors, generally speaking. And then the second thing I think people underestimate is the time commitment. And so that's really what I try to focus on is helping podcasters automate that process as much as possible.
Oh yeah, time commitment's huge because you also stay consistent to grow your podcast. And if you're only posting, I know some people that have podcasts, they release one like once a quarter. I'm like, what's that doing for you? I mean, they'll split up their podcasts into different sound bites for social media and stuff. So there's a new sound bite every week or every day, but it's not a new episode.
Yeah. And, to be fair, again, the way I look at podcasting is I don't necessarily feel like you start a podcast to get thousands and thousands of downloads, right? That will happen as your show gets better, as you learn your audience, as you deliver more value. But, people think of, I'm going to create clips for social media to promote my podcast. When it's the opposite. The podcast promotes your social media presence. The podcast improves the SEO for your blog. The podcast gives you content across the board all the time. So you have constant eyes on you. And the reality is you can have the best product in the world. You can have the best service in the world. But if you're not reminding people of it, you might as well not exist. And like it or hate it, yeah, that's where we're at right now.
Absolutely. So what's your opinion on, I mean, if someone doesn't want to start their podcast, but they love this form of digital media, they think it's a great way to get their clients to know them before they even hire them, which I think that's one of the best things about podcasts. People can listen to a podcast and know that person's personality before they hire them. What would be the next step on how to get on to different podcasts and be guests?
So I just released a YouTube video on this on the Mark Savant channel. There's a lot of steps. There's a lot of different tactics. So first off, the easy thing is just go where the podcasts are. Joining platforms like Podmatch, joining platforms like Guestio, Matchmaker.fm. It's really easy to reach out to shows. I recommend when you do reach out to a show, you keep your pitch very short. I just don't have time to read 10 paragraphs about how amazing you are and how lucky I am to have the opportunity to interview you on my show. That's not the right way to go about it. So when you find the shows, you want to keep it brief. And I definitely recommend starting the intro by referencing a specific episode of the podcast that you liked and a specific reason why. If there's one thing podcasters love, it's listeners. So if you're coming at a podcaster saying, I listened to this episode, Mark, I was listening to you on Eric Dillman Design Show, and I loved your point about social media posts driving attention. That was a really great point. I'm much more inclined to pay attention. So start by, kind of playing the flatter card.
Yeah. You probably have a bunch of YouTube videos on this as well, but when someone's trying to develop a podcast, let's say they want to start a podcast, what is the biggest thing that they miss before they even start a podcast? I mean, I'll let you think for a second. I think my biggest thing is they make the topic too generic. So when they go out and make a podcast, they can only fill up 4 episodes of that topic, and then they're kind of ran out of ideas. Like it's not broad enough to keep a conversation going.
Yeah. Listen, there's a lot of mistakes that new podcasters make. One thing is you try to be too clever with the title of your show, or you try to be too clever with the description, and then it's hard to rank. It's hard for people to understand what is the show even about. Maybe your show is too long, right? Like you're not Joe Rogan, a 2-hour, 3-hour long show. It's just really hard to keep people's attention unless you're extremely funny, or if you're a celebrity, or if you get Robert Downey Jr. on your show. You know what I mean? So I typically recommend shortening the episodes somewhere between 10 to 30 minutes. My episodes now typically range in that 15-minute mark, but sometimes they go long. I like to experiment with different things. The other thing I think that a lot of new podcasters get wrong is they're boring. And I don't mean boring like you suck, you're boring, but boring as in like you only have a few seconds to hook someone.
Yeah.
You've got like 10 seconds to hook someone. So if you open up your show with, hi, welcome to the podcast. My name's Mark. I'm really glad you're here. On this show, you're going to learn about all these great things that I'm doing. And I'm just, it's so great that you got to drop people right into the action. So like the other day I had James Altucher on my show and I didn't intro him. I didn't talk about anything. I just said, James, you wrote this post in 2020 about why New York City was dead. You still agree with that? Right. I want to drop people right into the action. And I think that's where that's when your podcast starts to pick up steam because people get dropped right into something that's interesting.
Gotcha. So basically, put that soundbite that you're putting on social media to promote the podcast, but put it in the front of your podcast when they're listening.
Yeah, that's a method that I would say is like a teaser. It's like a little teaser at the beginning. That's a good method. You got to start out the another thing is someone will start it out with a 45-second intro that they made themselves, and it's just kind of like it's fine, but people aren't getting excited about it. You know what I mean? It's not. So you got to get into it fast. People want it fast. They want the attention, and if you're able to capture that attention quickly, yeah, then you can hopefully keep their attention for a longer period of time.
Absolutely. So this is a question for a podcast host. So if they get a guest on, and I'm not going to say this has happened to me or not, but they have a guest that just it's hard to talk to. Like it's hard to pull questions out of. It's hard to even think of questions to ask them because they're just kind of just sitting there, kind of dry. What is the main advice you'd have for the podcast host?
Oof. Well, I mean, so you don't need to bring everyone on. Sometimes I get a lot of pressure from people. They want to be on the show. I'm like, listen, I'm getting thousands of downloads. I get dozens of requests every week. Like I even have a paywall put up for guests that want to come on, so you gotta learn to say no. And, I know it's like your best friend that, but they might not be a great guest. A, B, it's up to you to keep the show interesting. And one of the things that really stuck out to me, I was interviewing this girl, Jasmine Starr. She's a photographer turned social media coach / influencer. She's awesome. Big deal. But as soon as she hit the screen, she was giving me so much personality, and I think a lot of podcasters, as soon as the mic turns on, they put on their Tom Brokaw voice and let me ask you the first question, Mr. Now you got to use like, what makes you unique, baby?
Yeah.
Think Vince Vaughn, like give it some juice. And I think that makes for much more, it just makes things more interesting.
Absolutely. And that's something I know I did this in the beginning and I've been on podcasts. They have like a whole questionnaire, like they have it all typed out, like all the questions. And that's when those podcasts, they just don't do as well because they seem robotic. And I think a lot of the reason why people listen to podcasts is because it's so unfiltered. No one cares about if you swear or whatever you say. It's just so comforting. And it's more of a casual conversation.
Yeah. And I mean, listen, the podcast is your personal brand. So you might as well give as much personality as you can. Another common issue, and I've been thinking about this a lot recently, is disagreeing with your guest. The most fascinating conversations are when you might disagree with the guest and you give some pushback and some heat. That's a really interesting thing too. You don't just need to nod and say yes to everything they say.
That's a good point. Yeah. I mean, I probably fall to that too. I kind of just say yes or okay. I mean, that's probably something people think of controversial. They don't want to get in trouble or something, but if you look at any of these podcasts that are successful, they do that a lot.
They definitely do. And, I'm not saying you disagree just for the sake of disagreeing, but you're not required to agree with everything that everyone says. Our society has come to this point where if you don't agree with everything about me, then you're evil or you're mean or you're not a nice person. And that's bullcrap. You're a unique individual. There's no one on earth that's like you. There's no one on earth that's going to agree with everything that you do. I've been married I've been married almost 10 years. I've been with my wife for 16. There's stuff that she does that annoys me. And there's stuff that I do that annoys her. It doesn't mean I don't love her. You know what I'm saying? So, it's disagreeing doesn't mean you're a mean person. It just means you disagree. And the debates are what bring out the best points, I think.
Yeah. And I think that's exactly what you said. That's what's wrong with society now, because when you disagree with someone, that you put up a fight or it really just gets nasty. But it's okay to disagree with someone, especially during politics. During the election year is probably like the most heated thing you get with conversation with your family or your friends. I mean, I usually don't talk about politics on here, but I mean, it's something that it runs everybody's lives. It runs your businesses, and that's why we're here. But I want to start on to what your podcast is all about, After Hours Entrepreneurship. Entrepreneur. When did you start that out, and why did you start it?
The After Hours Entrepreneur launched just about 3 years ago. It was
Okay.
the second show that I had released. And I wanted to connect with movers and shakers that were entrepreneurs that were building businesses. I was in the process of building my podcast agency at the time, and I just wanted to connect. Um, and it's evolved a lot. It's a lot different now than it was when I first started it 3 years ago. We're about to 350 episodes. But it's just been it's been almost like a biography in a way, because I'm documenting the journey of building the business. And as the business grows, as my wisdom grows, as the revenue grows, the show has gotten more and more interesting. The guests have got more and more interesting. But at this point in time, I'm just so fascinated with disruption because you, for a lot of reasons. Every industry is being disrupted. The stuff that worked 10 years ago is going to be completely different in the next 10 years.
Mhm.
AI, automation, deep fakes, virtual reality, blockchain, everything is moving so fast. So I'm really fascinated with disruption because I want to help people survive what's about to happen and what's already happened. And I also think, if we're going to, as human beings, get to the next level, to get to the next level of our personal development or of our relationships, you have to disrupt your life, because what got you to where you're at today is not what's going to get you to where you're going to be tomorrow. So I've really become fascinated with the topic of disruption for those reasons. That's really what I'm focused on the show.
So, developing this show and you're trying to find your guests, how do you go about that? Do you take suggestions? Do you go out and look for people that are like-minded like you, or how does that come about?
Combination of both. So that's a great thing to do. If you're fascinated with someone, try to get them on your show. You can learn a lot from people that fascinate you. I've been spending a lot of time on the new Instagram Threads Pro
Yeah.
platform, and I've been able to get some guests that I've been trying to get for a while, I haven't been able to get to. And so, finding unique ways to connect with people that, the problem with trying to get someone on Instagram or on LinkedIn or on Twitter is those are mature platforms, right? They're getting bombarded with thousands of DMs. When they create a post, there's 1,000 responses. On a new platform like Threads, there's a lot more opportunity. It's not mature. It's brand new. It just released a week ago as the recording. So I try to find people that are interesting, and then I also have a guest application process. And so because I get so many guest requests, probably about a dozen to 2 dozen a week, it gives me the opportunity to be pretty selective on the guests that I bring on. And then thirdly, sometimes I just don't even interview a guest. I'll do a solo episode. Maybe I'm reading a book and I read something. I was like, wow, this is really good. Or I do an income report every month to say, this is what happened last month. This is what I learned. This is where I sucked at. And I think that, experimenting with different formats is a good idea.
Do you ever go back and listen to your podcast and learn from maybe mistakes you made, or just try to find new ways to develop your podcast better in your own personal, like how you present yourself and all that?
I do. I do. What I really pay attention to is when I get emails and feedback, because, listen, that's one of the really tough things with being a creative person is you'll ask someone, hey, what's your opinion of this home design? Or what's your opinion of this podcast episode? And people will always come back with something like, oh, I like it. Oh, that's good. Oh, that's nice. That's not helpful, right?
Mhm.
Why do you like it? Why do you not like it? Are you afraid to give me that feedback? So when I get raw feedback like Mark, I disagree with you. I think that you're wrong. Or if someone says, wow, that was spot on, those are the clues that I get to let me know that I'm onto something. Which, by the way, if someone is taking the time out of their day to send me an email to say that they disagree with me, that tells me I'm doing something right.
Oh yeah, 100%.
You want to find the dissent. That's the stuff that gets people riled up. I think that's interesting.
That's even on social media. I posted a video a couple weeks ago and it kind of went huge on TikTok, and the amount of bad comments, just like you shouldn't have put your hardware there. And I'm like, And probably 5 or 10 years ago, I'd be like, why are they saying that? That's stupid. And now I'm thinking, that's awesome that they're commenting that. They actually watched my whole video in detail to find those little details to complain about. That means they watched it in detail. So, like, everything I did was good on in my mind now.
Yeah, whenever you're being creative, you either want people to adamantly agree or adamantly disagree. I want the kind of those polarized responses. I don't like the stuff in the middle that's like it. That's
Mhm.
nice. I don't like it. I want like the fire. I want to say something that like burns a fire in someone's soul so that they have to type something. They just have to respond, because that's the type of stuff where that's the type of stuff that can go viral in this day and age. And it's the kind of stuff that gets people to share with their friends. I don't know if you've watched this new movie, Sound of Freedom, but you know, it's a movie about human trafficking. It's an indie film, was
Oh,
just released, and it's as of today, it's got, within the first week, made $40 million. It's the number one box office movie. And the reason for that is I've never seen anything like it. It was shocking and powerful. And then there was the media is angry about it. The media is coming out and saying like it's not happening, or this is just a bunch of QAnon stuff. There's a reason why that movie did so good, because people feel really strongly about it. And
mhm.
that's the type of stuff that you want to create.
Have you always had that mindset? Because that's a mindset that everybody strives to have when you're a creator or trying to put out content and put yourself out there digitally. A lot of people can't take that criticism and they take that as a negative. Have you always been that way, or how did you overcome it?
No, 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 definitely not. When I first started, showing up publicly, again, this was about 5 years ago, with my first podcast, The Awesome Dad Show. Um, I was I was very I was very nervous to speak my mind on some things.
Hmm.
Right. I didn't want people to think badly of me, or, and I was nervous to take risks, which, by the way, if you're in a corporate job, there's some things that you can't say, right?
Yeah.
That's part of the value of building your own business, is you get the clout and the ability to speak your mind. Um, but just recently I started to really embrace this idea. Like, I've got a solid business. I'm helping thought leaders launch, automate, and grow podcasts. And I've got a good book of clientele. We're tight. I run a pro community. That's good. The podcast generates income. So I've got streams of income that give me the safety and the freedom to take risks,
Yeah.
you know? And what happens is, once you get that freedom and once you're able to start taking risks, people start to notice. And that's when your creativity and your podcast will start to take off. And when I first heard this concept, I was talking to Patrick Bet David. That episode is on the After Hours Entrepreneur, and he's like, you got to be noisy, you have to find things to disagree about. And then a couple of weeks later, I was talking to James Altucher, who's written 25 books, and he said, Mark, if if I'm not worried what people will think, I don't write the article. And I just thought I'm like, wow, we're all sitting around like afraid to speak our mind, afraid to say something because we're afraid someone will be offended. And then it just gets drowned in this sea of mediocrity.
Hmm.
The winning is on the edges.
Dang.
You might, speaking of design, I'm not a huge AOC fan, but there was like a year ago, 2 years ago, she was at this fashion gala and she had this big dress on that said like
Oh,
tax the rich on it in blood. And I was like, you're a little hypocritical, A, but B, you get it that you're making noise. You're making people either love it or hate it. And that's really what you're looking for in the creative space.
oh yeah, yeah, and that's what people are afraid of, like you were saying. It takes time, and that's something like when I started this podcast, I was more afraid of disagreeing with someone or not asking the right questions. I think as an interviewer, even if you think of like the really good interviewers on TV that are doing sit down conversations with, any type of controversial topic, they're afraid to take the really good ones are not afraid to take those hard-hitting questions that they know will make the interviewer or the guest very uncomfortable, but it's good for the interview and it's also good for the guest as well.
Yeah, what I recommend doing when it comes to this topic of like, should I be controversial, is figure out the different topics that you're really educated on, that you can go deep on, whether that's design, podcasting, AI, website, sports. What are the topics you can go deep on? And then say, what are the commonly held beliefs in this topic that I just don't agree with? Okay. 90% of people, 95% of people think it's this. I think they're wrong, and this is why. And leaning into those types of topics will get you noticed. That's where thought leaders are found. That's how you become a thought leader. It's not saying, yeah, I agree with that. I agree with that. Thought leaders say that's what everyone else thinks, but they're wrong. And here's why. And I can back it up with facts, logic, emotion, etc.
Years ago, probably like, I don't know when podcasts first came out, like maybe 15, 20 years ago, they kind of came out hard and then for some reason kind of died down in the last probably like, I want to say 5 to 8 years, maybe they became huge. Do you think that's one of the reasons why people are just done with the primed and polished type of stuff and they're ready to hear, normal conversations and people are thinking differently and just bringing up conversation?
So the short answer is yes. I think that people, you can only lie to people so much until they're like, all right,
they're done.
I'm done. And I think that the whole COVID thing and like what you were allowed to say and what you weren't allowed to say, and a lot of those things that you weren't allowed to say ended up being actually true.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
And a lot of the things that you were allowed to say it, like you couldn't, like if you were to say the COVID-19 virus originated in Wuhan, you're a racist against Chinese people. Mm-hmm. Well, it turns out that it did, and all signs point to yes, right? So that's just one really hyperbolic example. But I think what happened is there was a post that MSNBC just posted out that working out is a sign of right-wing extremism or something. I was like, what?
Yeah.
So is that really what you're going for? And so it's, again, is someone who studies businesses, the old corporate media stranglehold on information has been completely disrupted because people are tired of being lied to, and they're going to trust that influencer that has been authentic and real, like the Andrew Hubermans of the world, people that are real. And even, and not to say that they always get it right, but at least they're being honest. They're not just saying, oh, well, this is what the guy in the rich, powerful board member told me to say, so this is what I'm going to say. It's no, I'm knowledgeable about the topic. I've done research. I've educated myself. I can go deep on this topic, and this is why I feel the way I feel.
Do you think corporate America, they have a grip hold on network television, and network television kind of going downhill, and all these streaming services coming in, podcasts becoming bigger? Do you think they do have some grip hold on some podcasts, but do you think they're afraid to get into the podcast world because they know they're not going to get the views or the viewership of it? Or do you think they are in the next so many years going to start bringing that in and kind of drilling their agenda again into it?
So anytime a new technology starts to see mass adoption, so here's the deal. Big companies, big corporations are like battleships. It's really hard for them to turn.
Yeah.
They have systems and processes and bureaucracy in place. It's hard for them to adjust quickly. So what's happening now is you're seeing big money being thrown around in the podcast industry, right? Rogan got some $100 million deal that we know on the books, but it's surmised that it's probably much more than that. Patrick McDavid offered Tucker Carlson $100 million to stream on YouTube for him, which is actually probably on the low end based on the views that Tucker's getting on Twitter.
Yeah.
So what's happening is the corporations are going to start to realize there's a lot of money here. There's a lot of juice here, and they're absolutely going to start getting into it. I mean, we're talking deals, advertising deals in tens of millions of dollars. I was watching My First Million the other day. The guys were interviewing Rob Dyrdek, and Dyrdek was talking about this supplement company that had been trying to build up. And this supplement company was just floundering. They were losing millions of dollars every month. They couldn't get it off the ground. It was just not working. And they were about to basically pull the plug on the thing. And then they landed a deal with Andrew Huberman, who is a very big podcaster in the health space. And they landed an advertising deal, and overnight that supplement product exploded. It went from dead in the water to one of the biggest supplement companies overnight. And as we see more of those use cases happen, you're going to see more juice flowing to the podcast industry.
Geez, I need to go back and see that, because yeah, that's awesome. I mean, that's something I don't think, if they do come to the podcast industry, I don't think they're going to get very far. Because I mean, if you look at shows like The View and stuff like that, views are going down because people are sick of the agenda of a lot of these big corporations. And I think if they do come to podcasts, it's not going to water down what podcasts are, but I just don't think people are going to turn to them.
We will see. I mean, and that's, I think, what's really interesting about this particular point in human history. And I talked at the beginning about disruption. That's exactly what we've got. We've got mass disruption. And I think that podcasts in general are going to be a very important part. Streaming. And when I say podcast, I don't necessarily mean listening on Apple Podcast or Spotify. That could be a YouTube show, it could be a Twitch show. Wherever you're streaming, wherever you're having long form conversations. And I think that's the key right now, is you need to have a place where people can listen to your long form ideas, listen to you flesh out and think through ideas. And you need to have a place where your short form content can live too, whether that's Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. You need a place where your short form stuff lives too. And that's important for attention. And as big corporations come in, they're going to have their agenda, which is to make money. And, regardless, we still have time. There's still a chance now for you to stand out, for you to take a piece of the digital media pie. I don't know how long it's going to be here. And what is going to end up happening is it's become harder and harder and harder to make noise. It's going to be harder and harder to be found. And the people that wait for that perfect opportunity, it's just never going to come. I don't know what to tell you. This really, I don't want to hog the mic here, but people are always waiting for something, for the perfect thing to happen before they take the action. No, you have to disrupt your life now. You have to disrupt your routine. You have to disrupt your habits. You can't keep doing the same damn thing. I just want to shake people. I had a buddy a few years ago that was talking about starting a YouTube channel. He really wanted to start this outdoor YouTube channel. This was years ago. He said, well, I want to start it, but I can't start it until get a kayak. Once I get a kayak, then I'm going to be able to kayak out to these different islands. I'm sure that cat never got a kayak. He never started his YouTube channel. And now I've got nearly 1 million views on my channel, getting thousands of downloads. And I'm like, dude, you just have to take action. You have to start. And most people will not, I don't know what to say. It's sad.
No, I agree. Comfort is one of the scariest things, in my opinion. Once you're comfortable in your job or comfortable in something, that needs to be some type of change there to make you strive to get to that goal better. But very well said. I want to finish off on where people could listen to you, learn more from you, where they can listen to your podcast, social media handle.
Yeah, you can find me at marksavantmedia.com. Marksavantmedia.com. That's where all my stuff is. And, hit me up, marksavantmedia.com, keyword Dillman. So I'll know where you came from. Hit me up.
Wow. Awesome. Mark, thank you so much for hopping on. I probably could talk to you for another hour or so. But like we said, the shorter the episodes are the better ones. Thank you so much again for hopping on, taking time out of your schedule.
Appreciate it, Eric.